I think we all know that people use distractions to occupy their minds from really getting into their thoughts. This normally comes up. You hear it quite often with like drugs and alcohol. But in my experience, what I found out is it's not just drugs. There's things like gaming, shopping, binge eating, scrolling Netflix or scrolling social media, binging Netflix and stuff like that. So it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's other things too. And what I found is that work and the pursuit of money is a very, very potent distraction. And I think partially because it's just so socially acceptable. You're supposed to be making money to find get a better future for yourself and look out for yourself. So, and I realized that it's like really addictive too. So it's called workaholism for a reason.
Hi friends, welcome back to Life Intended. Life Intended is a podcast that explores what it means to be true to yourself and live an authentic and purposeful life. Each episode explores my guest's version of personal growth, self-discovery, and the pursuit of becoming the best version of themselves, as well as how to find the joy in the journey. Today, I am talking to Matt Diggity. Matt is an authority on search engine optimization, or SEO. He is the founder of Diggity Marketing, Lead Spring, Authority Builders, the Search Initiative, Affiliate Lab, and the Chiang Mai SEO Conference. Matt was born in the U.S., has a master's degree in engineering from UCSD, began his professional career at a Silicon Valley startup, and he claims that he's a big-time nerd. Matt currently resides in Thailand. He's also lived in Costa Rica, Japan, and Bali, and he's traveled to more than 50 countries. And Matt is actually someone that my husband, Nick, follows on Twitter, or X. Matt shared a tweet, and actually this tweet is what we're going to talk about. It's going to be the basis of our conversation today. But when Nick saw that tweet, he knew that Matt's story was exactly the type of story that I wanted to share with you all. So he sent it to me. I replied to Matt's tweet, connected with him, and he graciously accepted my invitation to be on the podcast. So here we are today. We're going to talk all about that tweet, everything that led to in Matt's life, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation and sharing that with you all. So welcome to the show, Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Anything else? I know you have quite a long professional resume and have done a lot of personal. Anything else that you think listeners would want to or need to know about you for context in our conversation?
Sure. Maybe it's interesting. Why does this California guy live in Thailand? Yeah. So the background, as you mentioned, I was an electrical engineer, which is a fine job for money. And I just knew in my 80th hour of a cubicle week that was back to back, just, this is life of an engineer. You're just working your butt off. At a certain point, I just realized this is not sustainable. I don't like it. I need to change something. And I'd always really had a fondness for Thailand. I'd been going there on holiday vacations for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time. And I just always felt like it was home here. And then just one day I just was like, that's enough. I'm going to sell all my stuff and move out and figure out how to make money. And like the first thing I knew is I want to figure out how to make money that was give me freedom of time and freedom of location. So the obvious thing for me was figuring out how to work out online. And it just turns out that the first thing I stumbled upon was this thing called SEO, search engine optimization, which is basically how do you get websites to the top of Google for a given search? So it's not just Google just magically figures out what's the best content on the internet. There's signals that it's looking for. So SEO is the art of figuring out what those signals are and giving Google what it needs. And I just leaned into that. I liked it right off the bat. Something about like my gamer background and just it feels like a game to me. I mean, literally, Google is a leaderboard of who's performing the best. So I just took into that, and just became my life for many, many years, including it still is now. Yeah.
Yeah, I shared with Matt, I think part of my audience knows what SEO is and part of them doesn't. I think he just gave a really good explanation of what it is. There is a lot to it. Matt, I mentioned he's an authority on it. He is an authority on it and has done a lot of really great things in the space. Thanks for sharing that. Today's episode for my listeners is going to be a little bit different. It is actually really closer to what I envisioned my podcast being like when I launched it. So I'm excited for this episode. And really, it's sharing Matt's story. how he kind of had an epiphany, we'll say, in his life and made some decisions and went through a path to come out on the other side in a different place. And so I'm going to give him plenty of space today to talk about that. So, Matt, can you give us like a brief summary of this tweet that my husband Nick stumbled upon and shared with me and got this whole thing going?
Yeah. So I wrote a tweet about how I realized I was in the second half of my life. I was midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. And essentially, I had made a decision that I was going to step back from working, at least step back from working just for money. And in that process, I freed up a lot of free time and had more time with my mind. When you're not distracted by this pursuit of money, which is a very potent distractor, it can fill up 90% of your thoughts in the day. So what thoughts came up when that was all clear were not all great. I realized I had some anxiety under the hood. I realized I had some self-worth issues. And it got me down the path of figuring out, like, I just don't want to live this way. There's got to be some way to fix it. So I tried things like trauma therapy. I tried psychedelic therapy and a lot of meditation. And around the point of the tweet, this is like when I really started to feel the benefits. It all kind of turned over at the same point where it's just like, whoa, I'm onto something. This is something that really, really changed my mental state. And I felt like I just fell on it by pure chance. Like there's no operation manual out there that tells you like what you're supposed to do when you're 45, like I am, or when you're a man making changes, or just what there's just nothing that's taught in school. It just fell upon it because I have good friends around me, or just great resources, I guess. And I felt compelled to make the tweet because maybe it would resonate with someone. And then the call to action in the tweet was like, if this resonates with you, reach out to me and I'll have a conversation with you about it. Because I really feel like I stumbled upon something that I want to share.
Yeah, I love that. I love the willingness to be like vulnerable and transparent about it. I think is extremely admirable. But then also, sharing your experience and your tools and resources, that's how the next person who finds themselves where you were can come out of it maybe quicker, without as much like going through the spin cycle as they figure it all out for themselves. So talk about like the moment that you realized that you were in the second half of your life and what that felt like.
Well, I'm 45, so numerically, I'm literally in my midlife in the second half of my life, approximately. But it all really hit me after I got back from this really, really jam-packed, like intense work trip to Poland. What I realized is I came back just feeling completely exhausted and empty. And that kind of worried me because normally work trips are kind of the fun perk of my job. Like I get paid to travel and do stuff like spoke at a conference, which usually really energizes me as an introvert. I like going to a conference and then people can come up and talk to me, and then I feel like I'm being social without having to do the hard work myself. But this time around, I felt nothing except exhaustion and emptiness, and I was just like, "There's something wrong here. Something's changed. The glow is starting to wear off."
Yeah. Talk about like your definition of this money distraction, the pursuit of money, the money machine. How do you define that?
Well, I think we all know that people use distractions to occupy their minds from really getting into their thoughts. This normally comes up. You hear it quite often with like drugs and alcohol. So like, I use alcohol to stop thinking about my ex. I'll use drugs to escape my depression. I will smoke weed to help with my anxiety. Like these are normal things you hear all the time. But in my experience, what I found out is it's not just drugs. There's things like gaming, shopping, binge eating, scrolling Netflix, or scrolling social media, binging Netflix and stuff like that. So it's not just drugs and alcohol; it's other things too. And what I found is that work and the pursuit of money is a very, very potent distraction. And I think partially because it's just so socially acceptable. You're supposed to be making money to find get a better future for yourself and look out for yourself. So I found it was that was what was covering my mind up from like some of these things that were going on under the hood. And I realized that it's like really addictive too. So it's called workaholism for a reason. Like you do get dopamine hits from completing tasks all day and getting praise from the people you're working with and stuff like that. It's very addictive.
Yeah. A distraction is a really good way to think about that or to frame it. And I do think it's valid to talk about the different ways that looks for different people, because it doesn't have to be what society deems as like an actual addiction or a substance abuse problem or something like that. You know, you talked about eating, drinking, you know, any type of distraction that takes you away from like being fully present in the thoughts in your mind is definitely something that is far more common than I think people realize. So how did you like connect the dots from this feeling that you had to like that? In your tweet, you know, you said you sat up basically in the middle of the night and said you were going to stop doing things just for money. So how did you connect the dots that was going to be the thing that was going to help you feel differently?
Well, I actually don't think that this money distraction or like the work itself was a problem. I think it's a normal thing that you're supposed to do in your 20s through 40s and 50s, whatever. Like you should have a hard focus on accumulation, because not just because like you're setting yourself up, but this is also your prime years of your life where your mind is better equipped to make money. I've gone down this path of like reading a lot of books about the midlife crisis and stuff like that. There's a really good book by Arthur C. Brooks called From Strength to Strength. And he talks about something called the fluid intelligence curve. Well, the fluid intelligence curve is something that curves up in the first half of your life, and it's your ability to solve novel problems, find product market fit, just learn new things. And this is why like most of your like founders and entrepreneurs and CEOs are young, right? Then in the second half of life, you have a different curve. It's crystallized intelligence, where you take what you've learned and you're able to distill it and teach it to other people. But so like, in this first half of your life, you're supposed to be thinking about making money or starting a business or pursuing your career and stuff like that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think the problem that comes into play is it's just if it's distracting you from taking a look at the things that are really important in your life. Like if you have a bad relationship with your parents, or you're not being a proper father or mother, or you have anxiety or self-worth issues, then that's when I think it's a problem. And I talk about this a lot in my community in Chiang Mai. So Chiang Mai is somehow this like digital nomad hotspot and a melting pot for entrepreneurs and stuff like that. So I talk about this theory with a lot of people that, you know, like this money pursuit is a distraction, and that there could be anxiety under the hood. But I get a lot of resistance because many people think that the reason that I work hard is because I have an intense amount of pressure and anxiety that I put on myself. And if I get rid of that, then I'm going to stop showing up at work. I'm going to stop succeeding. And I do think that there's some truth to that. But I also at the same time think it goes the other way. Maybe you're productive in spite of the baggage that you carry with yourself. Because we all know that things like anxiety and pressure, they have a stress on the nervous system. You sleep worse, and et cetera. So there's some balance here, but I don't think that you can have a crystal clear, mental state and you're just going to go poor. Clearly there's examples of people that have solved both things at the same time.
Yeah. So when you had this epiphany, what was your wife's reaction to, I guess, how you were going to handle it by stopping the pursuit of money?
I think some part of her had a knee-jerk reaction, thinking, like, well, what about the future of our family? Are we going to have enough money and stuff like that? Because when I shot out of bed in the middle of the night, it was just like, I'm done. I quit. She's like, oh my God, he's lost it. I've reeled that back to more like I'm only going to work on projects that provide meaning, they're fun, and there's some kind of leverage to it. So like I can leverage my time in ways that are beneficial. So she originally had this knee-jerk reaction that maybe we're going to run out of money or something, but I think she trusted me, and she saw that like this was the right decision. She got behind me, and I think now she definitely thinks that was the right decision.
So I think for probably a lot of people listening or anyone that you've maybe shared your story with, I think that that can be a very real and scary thing. You know, it's like maybe people feel like, well, I would love to do that, but I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough runway, or I don't have enough things that I could leverage my time to do. So do you have any advice for people who may be in a situation where they can't like necessarily walk away from things or take a big break, on maybe some steps that they could take that would achieve a similar result?
Yeah, so I don't think these things are coupled. I don't think in order to do mental health work and in order to look at yourself and resolve traumas or whatever, you can't work for money. Like, I think they're completely decoupled. I think you can do these things at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really valid point too. You don't actually have to just like stop everything and throw up your hands and devote all of your time to it. You can definitely find some balance there. So once you had this epiphany and you started like doing the work, you mentioned that removing this money distraction revealed a lot of underlying things that were going on with yourself. So can you elaborate on the types of things that you discovered?
Yeah. Okay. So open book time. The first thing that really kind of struck me was like when I was young, when I was a teenager, just use teenage years. I thought the whole point of life was to make a lot of money or make enough money to the point where you can retire, and then you just get to play video games all day. So that's literally what I thought the point of life was. Obviously, I was pretty immature, but even in like a more adult context, I really thought it was about you make money and then you can retire on the money and then you just do the things that you like at this point. So I was running the simulation of, really scaling back on work and only working for fun and meaning. And I wasn't blissed out. I wasn't in full enjoyment of it. And that was like that there's something wrong with me. There's like many people would choose to be in my shoes, but I wasn't liking it. And then I started to realize, okay, well, let's really dig in. Like, what am I feeling? A lot of it had to do around self-worth. So I created this persona of myself as an entrepreneur, and what would life be like in the future as a non-entrepreneur? Who would I be? And then I started thinking about, well, in my life, I've had a couple bouts of depression. Let's say 2 or 3. And when I became an entrepreneur, that just stopped. And so I don't think that they're correlated together, but somewhere in my subconscious, I thought like productivity equals depression blocking. And so that got me scared too. I was fear slipping back into depression. And then the last thing, this is probably the most potent one, was a general, just the anxiety volume level was always turned up to 4 to 6 or something like that. And I think this boils down to, like working so hard and always wanting to be productive. And I looked at free time as wasted time. And so when I got up in the morning, it was like, I'd do my morning routine. I would meditate, looking at meditation almost like it was a chore, so just in the way of me getting started working. And then I would just hit the ground running, work as fast as I can, and then get all the stuff done, always with the thought like, today's the day where I'm not going to complete everything I need to do. Let's race to get it done. So then I'm done with all my work at 2 p.m. And then I'm just sitting here like, now what do I do? Because here's 2 p.m. to whenever bedtime is. And now I have all this free time, which I hate because it's wasted time. So this just cultivated just a sense of anxiety in me. And that anxiety was now tripled because I had scaled back on work and I had tons of free time. So these were all the things that were like really in my head over and over again. And let me just say, like, it wasn't torture. It was just all like set in this background of you're supposed to be happy now, and you're definitely not.
Yeah. And that's uncomfortable, right? Like,
yeah.
I think anytime you think that the outcome is going to be a certain way and it ends up not being that way, or to your point that you said a couple of times, like you feel like so many other people would be just thrilled to be in my position right now. And I'm just sitting here, just not loving it. And I think that a lot of people probably would just suppress that because it doesn't feel like it should be. So I'm just going to pretend like that's not the way I feel.
Yeah. I mean, I could have chose to drink it away. I could have chose to video game it away or find another distraction. But, I'm a dad. You shouldn't do that.
Yep. And I think the other thing that I would just like to highlight, because it's come up on a couple of other podcast episodes, is that I just think that so many of us are walking around with our anxiety levels up, like you were talking about, on that meter of 4 to 6, that we do not even recognize the amount of anxiety that we have, the amount of stress that our central nervous system is under, the reduced ability for us to handle things that are coming our way, process information, remember things. It's all of these things that this anxiety and all of these feelings are just doing to you. And so many of us are just like, this is normal. This is what it feels like. And so we just don't recognize it. So I think definitely it's to be commended to stop and realize this is not normal. And it's time now to do something about it.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to this belief that anxiety and pressure are the fuel to getting stuff done. And I think that's untrue. I think you get stuff done in spite of your anxiety and pressure.
Yep. And there's so many layers to it, right? There's comparison, there's expectations. There's just a lot of things that go into the reason that you feel like that. But
yeah.
So I think this is a great segue into what you started to do about it. Because I think, one of the things that I loved about your tweet was these are the things that I did. And for me, it's I'm familiar with them, but I don't know a lot about them. So I'd love to talk about each one, what it actually is, what it looked like for you, and how it helped you. And the first one that you mentioned was trauma-focused talk therapy. So tell us what that is.
Okay, so I had two things wrong about therapy. The first was I thought you sit on a sofa and then someone asks you a bunch of questions and then you eventually speak so much about it that you solve your own problems and then you move on. Like Good Will Hunting. That's what I thought it was. And then the second thing I had wrong about therapy is that I thought trauma was for people that went to war, saw a murder, were abused and stuff like that. And that's certainly trauma. But what I've learned is called big T trauma, trauma with capital T. Then there's little T traumas. That's something I discovered in the last year, where things happen to you when you're young, and usually up to about 18 years old, while your cerebral cortex logic center is still growing and you're learning to make sense of things. And things happen to you or they're said to you that cause a huge emotional reaction. Then trauma is a mechanism that steps in that says, we can't ever feel this again. We can't think this again. So number one, I'm going to delete this from your memory so you don't ruminate it on it all the time. Then we're going to set up rules about life. We're going to create stories. We're going to create protection measures to make sure you never feel it again. And you live your life with this stuff in the background because it's deep in the subconscious. It's like a core processing. If you're, for the computer analogy, it's your kernel process running in the background. An example of this, I won't bore you too much with these personal stories, but I think it kind of needs a little illustration, is when I was about 4 years old, and this is something that was completely deleted from my memory, but I discovered it again. When I was about 4 years old, I was going to sleep at night and I was dead convinced there was a monster in the closet. So I did what I normally do. Mom, monster's in the closet. It's going to get me. That night, Mom decided, Matt's 4 years old. He can't be scared of monsters forever. I'll let him cry it out. So what I experienced was, number one, the monster's going to kill me. Now I'm going to die. And the second thing is, Mom doesn't love me. Mom thinks that I'm worth sacrificing to the monster. She doesn't love me. There's something wrong with me. And so I lived my life with the background that there's something about me that's unlovable if even mom doesn't love me. So that this it doesn't make sense coming from an adult. Like I can completely see what she was going for, but as a 4-year old, that was my reality. And trauma stepped in and said, let's forget about this thing. That was really crappy, and we'll just put in some protective measures, like let's make sure you don't get too close to people so they can't find out you're unlovable.
Wow. That's really powerful, and also just it's amazing, I guess. So is the talk therapy, do they like uncover the stories?
Yeah. So what a trauma focused talk therapist will do is they will essentially, it works like this: is like you figure out something that's affecting you now. Like in this example, it'd be I feel like I'm unlovable or something, and then they work with you to trace. Well, where'd you get that from? Well, I had a girlfriend that she told me that whatever, she said something bad. It's probably not that, because that was recent. That was 5 years ago. You had a cerebral cortex. So let's dig back further. Let's keep digging. And then eventually a good therapist will not only help you identify, okay, sure, it's this situation with the monsters in the closet that caused all this thing. They'll help you release it. Another quick example is this is probably the biggest breakthrough I had, and it was about a month ago. I had a bully situation in high school. I was a freshman, and there was a situation where a bully was picking on me in front of a bunch of people, and I kind of just shut down. Like, I didn't defend myself. I just kind of took it. And so that we trace back to being the cause of, some feelings of always needing approval from others. And so we walked back, we visualized, walked back to the situation. I'm Big Matt, I'm me now, walked into that room, told the bully to go fuck himself, and then sat down with little Matt and made promises to him, said, I got your back. You don't need anyone else but me. I'm always in your corner. I will never judge you, and we will be best friends forever. And so that's the release mechanism. That's how you make it stop having a hold on you. And that one just really stuck. So for me, that one stuck. So I truly can say I'm my own best friend now. I've never said that before in my life. I never even thought about myself. Like, my own internal dialogue would definitely say, like, if you could read what I was thinking to myself a year earlier, like, dude, you're not your friend. You kick your own ass all the time.
Yeah. So how did you discover trauma focused talk therapy, or how did it get introduced to you?
Just by pure chance, pure luck. Like, a couple of friends of mine, they'd been seeing some therapists. They're like, dude, you got to try this guy. I was like, well, yeah, I like self-work. I'll give it a shot. And yeah, that's what he does. That's why I felt so compelled to make the tweet, because it's pure chance I fell on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can imagine, like, this seems like kind of a totally separate topic, but something, I'm a mother to a young daughter, and I feel like there's so much information now on raising children and how to parent and gentle parenting and attachment theory and all of these things, and cry it out or not cry it out. And, all of the research tells you, like, if you do these things, or if you parent in these ways, you can cause like psychological harm or things that, our parents weren't aware of, or nobody did these things with the intention that is the result. But, it's just like anything else, like, know better, do better. But it's, for me, hearing your story, especially about the monsters, it just really hits home. Yeah. I guess it just really hits home. I can really connect with that right now at the stage that I'm at, and what that must have felt like. But I think that type of therapy, I'm unfamiliar with it, had not heard of it, but it sounds incredible, really.
Yeah. Freaks me out as a father too, because it's so trivial. Like, in that situation with the monsters in the closet, I might have done the same thing. maybe wouldn't have done it now that I know like the impact it could make, but there's going to be something else I'm going to slip up on. There's no way you can have like a 24/7 radar and on guessing what will be really impactful for a toddler, or a teen. But I think the important thing is it's going to happen no matter what, and just be there as an adult, like when they're older, to talk about these things and give them the tools that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one approach that you took, kind of to uncover some things. And the next approach was psychedelic therapy. And this one I am familiar with. And to be honest, I'm hearing like more and more and more and more of it. People I meet all the time have done it or thinking about it. So tell us, first of all, to start out, like, what is psychedelic therapy?
Yeah, so the talk therapy is very manual, right? You're talking through it, you're working through it, and sometimes it's slow, and sometimes people are just very resistant to uncovering the past because it's hidden from them for a reason, because it's going to hurt, right? So that could be because of the walls they've built around it, or the stories that they've told about it, like that's why I'm productive, etc. The psychedelics are like going after it with a nuclear missile, like it's going to show up no matter what. And I mean, there's different types of psychedelics. There's a classic psychedelics, LSD and mushrooms. I'd tried those as a kid, teenager experimenting, but these days I'm using them in a more intentional sense to learn more about myself. I'd say with the classic psychedelics, like the biggest thing there is you get to a sense, a regrounding of like what's really, really important to you. And I find that money is not even close to being on that list. Family and community are very high. And being in that state helps me work through like complicated decisions. I have a second kid on the way right now that I don't want to say I was on the fence about, but I was just like unsure when we were going to do it or if it was the right decision. And, he's coming next month because of a realization on psychedelics.
Yeah. Amazing. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So how did you, I guess same question, like how did you get involved in psychedelic therapy?
Yeah. So, as a kid, just stumbling upon it, going to a music festival or whatever. But then I started hearing, over here in Thailand, I started hearing about the news in the States that people are using psilocybin in a clinical setting and getting great results. And then I started hearing about MDMA, like MDMA is making really incredible progress on PTSD. And so that just got me thinking, I wish I was in the States at this point because it's going to be ages before it gets over here in Thailand. And then now my foot's in my mouth because Thailand's on the cusp of legalizing psilocybin for mental health purposes. Okay.
Nice. So you mentioned that you have done both group and solo therapy. So what have those experiences looked like?
Yeah, group is interesting, especially with a group of close friends, because it becomes like a bonding experience. And the psychedelics have this effect of really, really lowering or reducing the ego to almost nothing. So you can get really, really deep in conversations and you're 100% authentic. There's no agenda. There's no ego. There's no, am I going to look bad if I say this? Am I going to look good if I say that? No, everything's really authentic. So it's like you can be your own therapist to each other and get really deep in conversations. Solo sessions are really interesting in their own way. I'd like to highlight MDMA as being one that's particularly impactful. So as I said before, MDMA is getting trialed as an extremely effective solution for PTSD, so trauma, right? There's a guide you can find online. You can find it yourself if you are remotely good at using Google. It's a solo MDMA therapy guide. So there's a protocol to using MDMA by yourself and being a self-therapist to sort through problems. And it's a really, really effective tool at basically doing this. Like you figure out what's bothering you now, and it doesn't take long till it points out exactly where that came from. So the monster in the closet thing, that was from a solo MDMA session. And the cool thing about MDMA is it's not psychedelic in the sense that there's visions and like crazy visuals, and you're not thinking weird thoughts. You're very lucid, and it doesn't give you a puzzle to solve. It just says, nope, this is it, and it's crystal clear. Yeah, I wouldn't say like I recommend everyone try it. This is a controlled substance, but it's something to experience, especially for those that are kind of stubborn with the talk therapy stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess another question would be like, when I first started hearing about it, I think that there is, for a lot of people, a certain stigma around it, that it's not, it's not legal, or it's not socially acceptable, or there's, a lot of things around it. So what would you say to somebody who, is kind of looking at it like, well, that's just not something that I'm going to explore? Like, why should somebody kind of change their perspective or just open their mind to that as a solution?
Yeah, we have a lot of leftover baggage from the war on drugs, in the 80s and 90s in the United States and all that. And, I get it. I grew up with that, and forever I thought, every drug is cocaine and heroin. You're going to get addicted. It's going to mess you up. If you really wanted to look into it, there's a history of MDMA, LSD, and psilocybin that made a lot of progress in the 50s and 60s, and we're on the way to becoming a legalized medicine for curing very, very stubborn, treatment-resistant mental health issues. And that research is in a renaissance right now, and I think we're on the cusp. Psilocybin's already legal in Oregon for therapy situations. I truly believe that there's going to be a time in our history, we're going to call it pre-psychedelics and post-psychedelics, when mental health looks like a night and day issue. So if you're on the fence about it, maybe you wait for it to get legalized. I don't think it's going to take long.
Yeah. Or maybe just have a conversation with somebody who's experienced it, because I think there's a lot of probably just stigma without a whole lot of understanding of what it is. And I think that's important too. The people that I've spoken to have shifted my perspective on it immensely, because, to your point, I was also a child of the 80s and 90s and the war on drugs and DARE. And, there's a lot of beliefs, I think, that we all hold about those things. So,
yeah. Remember, This Is Your Brain on Drugs, and they're frying an egg in a pan?
Absolutely. Yep. Seen that a million times. So, okay. So who would you say that type of therapy, and you might have just mentioned this, but who do you think it's right and not right for?
I don't want to get too much into that, to be honest. I'm not certified to answer that question, but from what I do know is, like, if you have severe PTSD, if you're dealing with war trauma or something, I'd have a clinician involved. Probably not go the solo MDMA route. For any of like the classic psychedelics, if it's your first trip and you don't know what to expect, have a guide there, a trip sitter, and hopefully someone certified and therapist. And you can find that in the United States now. And if you're on antidepressants, I know there's contraindications there. So, but again, I don't want to say who it's for and all that.
Do your research, basically.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so then the third, I guess we'll call it tactic that you have been using is meditation. So talk about how that has fit into your healing process and the benefits that you get from meditation.
So meditation as a tool for this only came onto the picture recently. I've been meditating for years and years and years. Like, I haven't missed a day in 7 years, but it wasn't till about 2 months ago where I really got serious about it. I kind of just had this realization, like, well, I go to the gym and I've used a trainer and I got results that were twice as fast as if I try to figure out by myself. Like, why don't I do the same thing with a meditation teacher? So I really stepped up my game there. And the reason I wanted to do that is because after doing all this work, right, I figured out that there's no monsters in the closet. Mom actually loves me. I'm lovable. I'm best friends with myself. I felt like I had to somehow keep this all in my head at all times and like repeat it over and over again. Because if I forget this stuff, I'm going to go right back to the anxiety and stuff like that. What I learned from meditation is that it's not really about like keeping like this mantra and like storing the stuff on your brain, that's going to take a lot of like resources, like to keep all that in there all the time. It's more about catching yourself when you're having thoughts or a mental state that are not conductive. And so you realize that's happening, you break the thought pattern, and then you decide, well, how would I rather feel? Well, right now I realize I'm really bored and wanting to get out of this particular situation. Well, let's notice that. Let's say boredom. That's cute. You come up from time to time, but we don't need you right now. I'd rather feel inspired. And so then, well, how do I feel inspired? I do things that are inspiring. So let's change the situation. Let's engage with it. Let's have a conversation that's inspiring. And so that's really what I've gotten out of meditation. Like all the other work has gotten the framework, and meditation helped me keep it.
Okay. Yeah, I like that description. And I think, my understanding of what you just said is, it really allows you to call on what you need when you need it instead of, like trying to carry it all with you all the time.
Mm.
Like,
yeah.
So you basically have it. It's just, how can you access it?
Yeah. It's like a radar for catching what you don't want. And then you can replace that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So those were the three, strategies, tools, tactics that you used, or three of them. So you mentioned that things got worse before they got better. So talk a little bit about what that felt like. And, I know that you mentioned, you're just coming out of it. So you may not even be like all the way on the other side. So, yeah. What has that been like?
Yeah. So this journey has been about 12 months. And I'd say it started coming out of it about a month and a half ago. And I think what was going on, this is my understanding of it, is like I mentioned before, there's the uncovering phase where you're like figuring out, here's how I feel. There's anxiety. Here's where it came from. But then there's the release part. And I think what happens, at least the way I did it in the beginning, I was like stacking up all this uncovered stuff, but I wasn't releasing it. So it's just getting like worse. Like now, okay, great. Now I know why I'm so messed up. But the stuff still exists. So it wasn't until I really started like learning how to release it. And that was, learning from the therapist and doing more psychedelic sessions, talking more about this stuff with friends. I mean, one of the main reasons I'm talking to you right now, other than just wanting to share my story and hopefully help another person, is because this becomes more real to me. This becomes this therapy in itself to kind of sound this out.
Yeah, I love that. So what is this better feeling? What does that feel like?
It's kind of like, it's not like I'm blissed out. So I definitely have moments of bliss. And most days are just normal days, but there's no bad days anymore. I think that's the key thing. Like, I don't really have anxiety. I don't beat myself up. I don't pressure myself to do work. It tries, the brain tries, but it usually stops in its track.
Yeah. No bad days anymore. That's inspiring. Yeah. So I guess like, how would you say you like reached the point where you felt like control over your emotions and became best friends with yourself?
Yeah, that was the breakthrough with the bully. I don't know why, but that particular visualization of going back there and sitting down with my young self and making that promise, it just stuck. I'm not sure why. I even tried stuff like that before on different topics, but it didn't stick. But this one just really stuck. As over control over emotions, I used to think that emotions are these products of the subconscious that they surface. All of a sudden I'm feeling anxious. Great. I don't know where that came from, but I got to ride this one out. And then hopefully the next emotion I feel is happiness or something like that. I thought there's no control over them. And it wasn't really until I got into meditation that I realized you could change your state, which just shouldn't have been surprising to me. Like, obviously you can have a shot of tequila and change your state. You can watch a good movie and change your state. I just didn't make the connection that like I could do it manually with my own brain.
Yeah. Which is empowering, right?
Yeah.
Powerful. Yeah, for sure. So what have you noticed changes in relationships you have, like with your wife, your friends, as a parent?
Yeah, sure. The family, I would say I'm much more present. I'm, I'm in a good mood. There's not as many days where I, lock myself in my office and just work because I'm feeling anxious or something. So I'm just more available, more present. With my friends, I'm not saying this is because of me. It's coincidence, just the movement of the community. Um, Everyone's on this journey around me right now, or a lot of people are at least, and so it's really really fun to see like other people have breakthroughs, and we're all SEO professionals. Like usually we talk about like what's latest going on with Google and all that kind of stuff. Now 90% of the conversations are about personal growth, which is really fun.
That is a big shift. But, it's you are the sum of the people around you. And so I feel like if everybody's on that same journey, it just helps everyone, I don't know, just commit to it more, hold each other accountable in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And grow together, which is neat. And I don't imagine that there are many adult situations like that where you're going through these things that are like, I'll say hard, but like really hard,
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think it's just pure luck. And if I could bottle this up and figure out how to give it out to people on scale, I would. It's just kind of shocking to me that the knowledge is just out there already, which makes me feel like it doesn't percolate well. I think it needs to be almost in a like one-on-one conversation or hopefully this podcast does its work.
Yeah. So part of your tweet was, like if this resonates with you, reach out to me. I'll share like my resources and tools. So in a different kind of way, like what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from this experience, and what would you like to share from it?
I mean, the biggest thing is we have control. We have control over our feelings and thoughts. The brain is really, really powerful, and I think there's a lot to learning how to use it and train it to do amazing things. I mean, our bodies can do amazing things if you train it. So why wouldn't the brain be any different? It's a billion times more complex. It's there's a lot to it, and you've trained yourself to learn amazing things already. Well, why not train it to learn how to be good to yourself? So I think that's one of the biggest lessons. But also just like some context, I always want to say that, like anything with like classic psychedelics or stuff like that, like, if this is your first journey, don't go into it just thinking like, I'm going to take a hero dose of LSD or mushrooms and not tell anybody. Like you go into it with a guide, like do everything safely, because these are powerful medicines. Like I mentioned before, it's like they're nuclear missiles.
Yeah. And how would you suggest somebody get started if this story and kind of your journey resonates with them?
I would say start with the talk therapy, the trauma therapy. Yeah, like I'm not talking about the war trauma again. I'm talking about the little T trauma, which in my experience had been weighing me down my whole life. And how to find a good trauma-based therapist, I would say, ask for recommendations. You know how it is with life. As soon as you start looking for something, that you realize that there's people around you that have access to that kind of thing or know someone. But yeah, definitely ask for a recommendation.
Yeah. And I think, just from my, I'll say, not extensive understanding of trauma and like little T trauma, and maybe you can add to this, but I think that it affects far more people than realize it.
Yeah. I mean, if a monster in the closet can get you,
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty more. I don't want to bore your listeners with all these little trivial things, but I mean, that's nothing. I heard on Joe Rogan podcast once, he said it quite well. The worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, whether that be you were abused as a child or someone scratched your car in the parking lot. You're going to make that the worst thing that ever happened to you. And when you're a child, that's a big thing. When someone says offhand, don't eat candy, it's going to make you die, like your kid's going to freak out.
That's a really good quote too. a lot to think about and consider in a lot of ways. But I've read too, your like psyche is almost completely formed by the time that you're 7 years old. So it is those things that you have experienced as a young child that contribute to who you are as an adult. And if you are in these experiences and then your brain, blocks them out, you really have no idea unless you seek out some further understanding or therapy or anything like that. So I guess having talked through that, it probably affects everybody, right?
I'd be shocked if it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're at time. This has been awesome. I just wanted to give you a minute, like if there's anything that you wanted to say or share or leave listeners with that we didn't go over, I'd love if you have something to share it.
Yeah. I mean, like as I said, at the end of the day, I'm a marketing professional and I have a Twitter and YouTube you could follow if you're interested in that and entrepreneurship stuff. But I'll start dripping in more of this kind of content on those places as well. So yeah, if anything, just follow me on YouTube, Matt Diggity.
Yeah. I'll link all of Matt's links in the show note, but Matt has a really big YouTube following and channel with a lot of really good content on there. So definitely check that out. And thank you so much. This has been amazing. I appreciate you sharing your story, accepting my invitation, and can't wait to get this out and hear what people think about it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, and we will talk to you all later. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode. It's truly an honor to help bring these conversations to you. I do have a couple of quick favors to ask of you. While you're listening to an episode, could you take a screenshot and post that to your Instagram stories and tag me at Life Intended Podcast? And just let me know what your favorite takeaways were or what you liked about the episode. It really helps me to learn more about what you love and want to see more of. And if you have a few extra minutes, if you'd go to iTunes or wherever you listen, I'd love it if you could leave me a rating and review. Ratings and reviews are one of the best ways new listeners can find the show, and I'd love nothing more to grow this and help more people live a life intended. See you again here next week.